The final signal. I took the job as a fire lookout in the middle of nowhere for the peace and quiet. 3 months, alone in Watchtower, surrounded by miles of dense forest and silence. It sounded like heaven. I'd had enough of people, of noise, of the endless notifications that pulled me in 1,000 directions at once. Here, there was no cell service. On an ancient radio transmitter to call in reports to the main office twice a day, if it worked. At first, everything was just what I'd hoped. I'd climb to the top of the tower every morning, making my rounds with the binocular and scanning for smoke or anything out of the ordinary. My days were silent and repetitive. Even at night, all I had to do was scan the dark tree line below, checking for stray lights or anything unusual in the forest. It was simple, uneventful work, until one night it wasn't. On the second week, just as I was turning off the transmitter after my final check-in, I picked up a faint signal. Strange. Given the transmitter's age, it only worked at a close range and was prone to cutting out during bad weather. But the static that night was unmistakable. A faint crackling that wouldn't fade. I leaned in, adjusted the dial, thinking it might be interference from another tower. And then, under the static, I heard it. "Can you see it?" The voice was soft and eerie, almost lost in the static. It sounded weak, like it was coming from far away, almost swallowed by the distance. I froze, listening. Sure, I'd imagined it. There wasn't another tower for miles, and the forest was empty. Too remote for anyone else to be picking up my line. I stayed there, waiting for something more, but the crackling eventually died out. When I went to bed that night, I couldn't shake the voice. I told myself it was just a trick of the static, interference, or maybe something left over from a previous transmission. But as the day wore on, I kept thinking about it, and each night I felt a little less comfortable in the silence. The following night I picked up the signal again, this time as I was singing off. The same crackling, but louder. This time the voice was cleaner. It was the same voice, soft and chilling just under the static. "Look closer." I told myself it had to be a prank. Maybe someone in the main office messing with me, or some interference from a distant broadcast. But I still felt like it was directed, personal even. I scanned the tree line below, my eyes darting between every shadow, every twist of tree branch in the breeze, hoping to see something, and afraid of it at all once. But there was nothing. The next day, I mentioned it in my report, half joking to cover my unease. My supervisor laughed at it, said the old radios picked up strange things all the time. But I asked if it could be another tower or local broadcaster. He only shrugged it, saying I was miles from anyone. "You're out here alone." He kind of chuckled. "If you're hearing voices, maybe it's time to calm down and get a break." I told him I was fine, but my confidence was wavering. Still, I pushed it aside and did my job, trying to ignore the feeling of being watched. That night, as I made my final transmission, the voice came through again. This time clear, louder. I felt a chill as it seemed to be whispering directly to me. "They're waiting for you." My heart started pounding, and my fingers hovered over the transmitter, unsure if I should respond, but my voice came out in whisper. Who? The silence grew, stretching on until I could almost hear my pulse against the static. Then, just as I was about to shut the transmitter off, it replied, "Look behind you." I spun around, my flashlight aimed at every corner of the small room, but nothing had changed. I was alone. I told myself it was nerves, isolation, or exhaustion, but deep down a nagging doubt clawed at me. I locked the doors, even though I knew no one was out there, and spent the rest of the night in the corner of the tower, my back to the wall, waiting for morning to come. The next night the voice was waiting for me as soon as I turned on the transmitter. This time it sounded more insistent, almost angry. "They're coming." My hands shook as I turned up the volume, heart pounding. "Who's coming?" I managed to ask, my voice barely a whisper. "They're getting closer." The words hissed through the static, and I felt a sharp, prickling sensation as if the valves were closing in around me. I took the binocular and scanned the tree lines, but nothing seemed out of place. And yet, as I swept the area again, my light caught a strange shape between the trees. It looked like a figure, tall and thin, standing perfectly still, but when I blinked, it was gone. The voice on the transmitter laughed, a low, guttural sound that made my skin crawl. "You're not alone." My stomach twisted as I stared at the transmitter. Wishing I could turn it off, but something kept me rooted in place. Listening. The voice was growing louder, clear, like it was somehow closer. I spent that night pacing in the dining room, every creak of the wooden boards echoing in the silence. I could swear I heard faint footsteps outside, but each time I checked, I found nothing. I slept with the lights on, feeling my nerves fray with every second that passed. When morning finally came, I was too exhausted to think straight. But one thing was certain. I needed to get out of there. But the next morning, when I tried to contact the main office, all I got was static. No responses, no messages, just silence. My only lifeline, the outside world, gone. Panic gnawed on me, but I kept trying, hoping for something, for some faint signal, anything. And then, just as I was about to give up, the voice returned. "They're inside." My heart stopped. The words, they were so clear, so close. I turned around expecting to see something standing there, something waiting, but the room was empty. I kept glancing around, terrified to look away, but every shadow seemed to shift, every corner seemed darker than it had been just moments ago. I could hardly breathe, convinced that something was watching me, hiding just beyond sight. I grabbed the transmitter, desperate, as if it were some kind of protection, but the voice only laughed, a low, raspy chuckle that filled the room. I backed away, my eyes glued to the door, when I noticed something new. Muddy footprints leading from the door to when I stood. I froze, staring down, feeling my breath catch in my throat. I hadn't opened the door all night. The transmitter cracked, and the voice whispered one last time. Look outside. My hands were shaking as I lifted the binocular, looking out into the forest, and then there they were. Figures. Dozens of them. Pale and tall, standing between the trees. They stared up the tower, eyes dark, hollow, unblinking, fixated on me. As I write this, I can still see them, shifting closer every time I glance out the window. Tonight, I know they'll finally reach me, and for the first time, I wonder if the voices was never trying to warn me. Maybe it was 𝘭𝘰𝘰𝘬𝘰𝘬𝘭𝘰. Maybe I was supposed to be here all alone. From the start.